Hey,
Hi.
how are you? Are you able to hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can. Are you getting background noise? I've got an air conditioner on, which I can turn off if you can hear it.
I am not getting any noise. No.
All right, if that changes, let me know. We've been like 100 degrees here, so, but I can turn it off if need be. So,
Okay. So, we can start off with a short introduction. So if you could talk about your writing career and also your name and your total number of published books.
okay, sure enough. So this is just recorded, correct? Is
Yeah.
that okay? So, what happened?
So we had a sign up form for people to sign up with the link. And that was another member of our team who had made the form. So I think that she had meant to email the people who signed up the link, but
Oh,
she has a different email from me, so that kind of got messed
fair
up.
enough. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, oh. Well, sure. I so I am Monica Roe. I write books for middle grade and young adult readers, and have just signed a contract for my first picture book project, which will be something different. I have probably, I think, 9 published books total, with a 10th the picture book forthcoming in 2026. So,
Mhm. Yeah. So what's your number one best-selling book been?
Air has been my most popular book to date. That's
Uh-huh.
this one right here. Whoops.
Uh-huh.
Oh, well, that doesn't really work very well. Nope. There we go. And that one was brought out by FSG, Farrar, Straus, Giroux, Macmillan in 2022, and was also just released at the end of last year in Japan,
Oh,
uh,
wow.
Shogakukan Publishing. So that was kind of neat. But yeah, so Air is definitely my book that's reached the widest audience, I'd say, to date.
Uh-huh. So, what was your motivation for writing Air?
Finding Air? Well, Air's a story about it brings together a lot of, I guess, the different parts of my professional and personal life. It's a story that takes place in a small rural community, very similar to how I grew up, and it centers around a protagonist who um, lives with a mobility disability, and a lot of the story focuses on her kind of bumping up against other people's expectations of what she should be able to do or what she can and can't do, and how she has to deal with that and come to speak up for herself and what she knows she needs. And I am also a pediatric physical therapist, and so that part of the book, was pretty true to a lot of, kids I've worked with over the years, who are often underestimated by the people in their lives or their communities, because of, what, you know, what others might think that, someone with a disability can or can't do.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I wanted to tell a story that explored, I call it well-meaning ableism. Good intentions where you just want to help, but
Yeah.
sometimes it's easy to forget. Help is only help if somebody wants help or
Mhm.
needs help. So otherwise it can cross boundaries, and it can trample on people's agency.
Uh-huh.
Um, so that's kind of how it all came together, really, I guess. And then, like many of my books, just often I start with a voice, and Emmy's voice just appeared in my head, and then I waited for her to kind of tell me what the story was going to be.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So touching on that, so what's your writing process like for your novels and your middle grade fiction? Like how long has it taken you on average to write those type of books?
Oh, I'm slow. I'm very slow. if I'm writing, well, if I'm writing like a short chapter book, some of my books are, like, chapter books for, maybe upper elementary readers. And those I could draft one of those in about a month. And then going back and forth with editorial, it could be another 6 months to a year. I'm just like, passing manuscripts back and forth. The picture book that'll be coming out, that one was didn't take as long. I think I drafted that in a couple weeks, and then I did several revisions of it before I sent it, before I gave it to my agent, and then she took it out on submission. Air took, oh, the idea for Air, I think I had that back in like 2014. So
Oh,
there were a
wow.
few, I'm a marinator, so I'll have, an idea will occur to me, and it might drift in and out. And, as you probably know, as a writer, we get ideas all the time. And,
Yeah.
some of them may not go anywhere, and some of them, may turn into something. And for me, it takes a while to know if it's like a keeper idea or one that's, needs to just float on by. So I think probably, I mean, I did some like early brainstorming that first year, like just like talking it out with another writer friend, jotting some notes, and then I put it away for a few years, and I don't think I picked it back up again until maybe 2018, I'd say.
Mm.
Uh, yeah, probably 2018. And then I signed with my agent in 2019, and we spent a good year. I needed to draft the second half of it, and then to go through like a bunch of revisions before she took it out on sub to publishers, and that took about a year. And then after it went on submission, I think it took about 5 months before it was picked up by FSG. So it
Mm.
can be long. I know plenty of other writers who are more prolific than I am, or faster at writing than I am. I'm just take a while, and I have like lots of stops and starts and lulls in the middle in real life, and
Mhm. Yeah, so I know that Air was a realistic fiction book. So are most of your books written in like in that same vein of like realistic fiction, contemporary fiction?
they are actually not by design, I guess. I mean, I've certainly have like fantasy projects, or more like like middle grade fantasy stuff that I've worked on, but nothing that is out and published yet. So most of what I've yeah, the picture book that's coming out, that one is more fantastical, but in general, I tend to be a contemporary realistic. Um, that's the space where my voice seems to currently be. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So when you were talking about how long it took you to publish Air, I was thinking about something that I've heard, that writing a book is like having a baby. I don't know if that's if that's a good analogy, but um I feel like there are a lot of people involved in writing a book, like the publishing house and then the agents and the editors. So how many people do you think on average like contribute to the success of like the average book that's published?
That's an excellent question, and the answer is probably different for every author. But if you flip to the acknowledgement section,
Uh,
in a book, that I mean, I'm looking at mine, and I have like 2.5 pages. So like for my team, like my team at FSG, I had an editor, his assistant, there was the copy editor, there was the person who did layout, there was the art designer, there was the cover artist, then there's all the folks in publicity and production, there's my agent, and then the people who work at the agency with her, her assistants, and then that's just like the logistics. And then there are the bookstagrammers, and then there are the librarians, and the all the booksellers, and everyone who um, promotes the book, or reads the book and likes it and passes it on, or reviews it on Goodreads, or gives it to a kid. And then there's all the people like, in your on your little personal team. There's for me it was, the spouse who would, just bring food to the desk, while I was, eyeball deep in revisions. And then there are your writing friends, if you're lucky enough to have, a critique group or a writing or a critique partner or a writing community, they all play such a big role in, reading your work, reading your early work, and then, helping you figure out what's working and what isn't, and, you know,
Yeah.
how to make it better, and, not to give up when you're in that, terrible middle part where it feels like it's awful. So
Uh-huh.
it, it's like
Takes a village.
it does. And it's interesting because writing can be so, it can feel so solitary because a lot of times, you're at your desk, you're alone, just tapping words into the void, but then the process of writing, I think, can be solitary, but then the process of making a book, that you've got a whole community really that helps make that happen. And if you're writing a picture book, of course, your illustrator, they're, they do a huge amount of, of what makes your book, visually, captivating, and how to, express the story that you've written in images, that will be, you know, attractive to young kids, and, tell the
Yeah.
story. And
Yeah. So I'm kind of curious about working with an illustrator. So like how do you choose one, and then like after you've like partnered with them, like how do you make sure that like their images are like on par with what like your vision for the story? Like how does that work?
Another good question. It Now, I can't speak to self-publishing because I'm not really, since I'm traditionally published, I can't really speak to how it works in the self-publishing world.
Uh-huh.
Um, but in the self-publishing world is where you choose an illustrator. If you
Oh,
write something, you hire an illustrator, you hire an editor. Um, in the traditionally published world, you don't choose your illustrator.
oh, huh.
Yeah. So now, there may be, there may be a little bit of, if you're, really far along in your career, perhaps, and you may, they may give you a little bit of input, or, just seek your feedback. But in terms of like, usually when you, like when your book sells, like say a novel, so your book sells, and then what they did, like at FSG, what they did, I don't believe this is the case for all authors. I mean, I've written books where I had no input over the cover whatsoever. And it was just a surprise, luckily it's always been a very good surprise. But for air, my editor asked me to make a mood board. So he asked me to just make a mood board in Pinterest of like what imagery I associated like with the book as I was writing it. So I made a bunch of stuff, and then they came back, um, Mallory and Oriole, the design team, they came back with some initial sketches, and then they actually brought it to me for my feedback. And I loved most things about it, but there were some issues of, the accuracy of the wheelchair, and some of the protective equipment. The early sketch, she didn't have a helmet on,
Mhm.
and so there are things that they wanted my feedback on. And, in the first version, it was, she was in a, it was like a big house in a suburban backyard, and this takes, place in the rural deep south, and she lives in a rural. So it's, just the small things that, you go through different iterations. And I was, blessed with a fantastic team that really, brought me into the discussions on everything. And really, when I voiced feedback, they were wonderful, to work with, about, reaching a a final product that we all, really felt great about. um Now, the picture book, that was a little different with an illustrator. I didn't choose the illustrator, but so usually what would happen if you are not an author and an illustrator, like if you're not writing and illustrating your own picture books, which some authors do, not I. But usually you would just write your manuscript, which can be like, 500 words. I mean, picture book manuscripts tend to be,
Yeah.
shorter. But so what will happen is then, your agent, or you, if you're representing yourself, would take that manuscript out on submission, and then, when a publisher buys it and contracts to make it into a book, then they will, assign an illustrator. But in this case, there was another agent at the same agency as where my agent is, and she saw the manuscript and she said, "Hey, well, I've got an illustrator that I represent who I think might do a great job with this story. What do you think about, would Monica like to work together with her and, send this whole thing out as, a more finished product with an author illustrator pair already like together?" So that was just a suggestion that she had. And so what happened was, that illustrator she made like some samples, like she read the manuscript and then she made some sample sketches, and she submitted them to my agent and me. And then we kind of, we looked at it, and of course they were amazing. So it was, we saw them, we were like, yeah, this would be great. So that's how that worked. And so then we submitted as, a team.
Mhm.
But originally it was just going to be a regular, submit it as a manuscript only, and then, wait for the publishing house to assign an illustrator. But no, it worked out really well.
Uh-huh.
And,
Yeah.
Penguin bought it, and then they bought the manuscript and the illustrations. So they didn't want to replace, either half of that. So that was nice.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's nice. So I know that you've been writing since you were like a kid. So
Yes.
did you did you go to college for that, or did you do something else in college? And of course, like it hasn't been your primary career, right?
No.
Okay.
Yeah. So I no originally, I mean, I was always a scribbler, uh, very dreamy and very scribbly. So I was always like writing terrible little stories down. Luckily, very few of those have survived because they were dreadful. But no, I did not. I studied like pre-health, biology, chemistry as an undergraduate. I squeezed in a minor in English writing because I just loved it so much. But no, and then I went to graduate school for physical therapy. So I got a doctorate in that, and then I practiced, for a number of years, um, as a PT, and then at a later point, I decided that I wanted to pursue an MFA, or a Master of Fine Arts, in writing. But so I was already an adult at the time, and it was like a later decision that I decided I personally wanted to build a. There were some skills I wanted to sharpen, and I was writing in a very isolated way. I didn't know anybody in the writing community, in the writing world. And I really wanted to have that intensive experience and meet other people who were similarly focused on it. But that said, I in no way think that that's something you have to do. I don't think
Mhm.
you have to get an MFA, or you have to major in writing or English, or, I think it's one path, and I do not think it's the only path or even the best path.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
That's,
Yeah. So what are your goals for the future, like regarding writing and publishing more?
hmm. Well, right now I'd like to finish the draft, the manuscript I'm working on right now. It's been going slowly. It's another contemporary middle grade, but so I would like to finish the draft of that. I'd love to draft by the end of the summer, but probably by the end of the year be more realistic.
Mhm.
And I would love to finish the big middle grade, like creepy fantasy that I've been working on. Like it's kind of like been like a secret project here and there for 7 years now, and
Oh.
it's a different genre for me since I do work more in the contemporary realistic space. But it's a dark little story I've been playing with for a long time, and I think I've been waiting to become a good enough writer for the story. So
Mhm.
that I think that when I started, just didn't have all the skills to pull it off. And I'm hoping as I go and publish other books that eventually I'll have the skills to bring that one home, if that makes sense.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So do you have any advice for like young writers or writers who are still in school?
It's cool. Yeah, it's a question you get asked a lot for sure. And I think it can be very overwhelming. At least I remember being, in school. I wasn't studying writing. I really wanted to be writing, but I was, very busy with other academic stuff and I didn't know any other writers. I think one of the biggest things I'd say is find other people who love writing like you do. That's
Mhm.
the first step, I think, is it's really good to be able to let other people read your work, not your mom or your someone who has to love it, but other writers, other people who are writing, and whether they are further along in the journey than you are or just starting out like you are. I think that the act of coming together and sharing something you've written and reading something else somebody else has written and being able to learn how to take and give feedback, in a kind but honest way. As it's I think when you're starting out, and even when you're a seasoned writer, I think it can be very easy to one either like fall in love with your words and think it doesn't need anything, it needs no editing, and this is the masterpiece, no one understands my story like I do. Fall into that trap. And then you can also fall into a trap if you're not used to getting feedback and you get feedback, it can knock the wind out of your sails. It can give you stage fright. It can, and I've been guilty of that. Even now, sometimes if I give pages to my agent or my editor too fast, too soon, that if they give feedback, it'll like, oh no, it's terrible. It'll freeze me up. So I've learned, even though I want to send you these 30 pages, I'm waiting till I'm like at the halfway mark of the book,
Yeah.
because sometimes it's hard to see what the author's vision is if you're only seeing a bit of it. But all that to say, I think it's really good to get used to receiving feedback, and being able to one practice receiving it, you know, without feeling like defensive or hurt. But then also, what do I take on board from this feedback and what maybe won't work for my story? Because people will, have things to say and it may or may not be right. But I think that's one of the biggest skills you can develop is to learn how to get and give feedback.
Hmm.
That's
Yeah.
that's the first step, because first
Yeah.
you got to write the book, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You writing, yeah. I don't think you need to write every day. I don't write every day because I have a very busy other side to my life. I think that, but I think as long as you're moving forward on projects and a big thing actually is to finish your projects. This is one that I struggle with, starting a project and then, it's always bright and shiny at the beginning, and then you're in the
Oh
middle.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
you're in the middle and it feels awful, and no one's ever been as bad a writer as I am, and
Yeah.
simple that up, and then ooh, a new shiny idea, and then the same thing happens because there's no easy way through a book.
Hmm.
You have to go through that mucky, awful middle where it just feels like you're writing garbage. and it can be easy to just want to stop. So
Yeah.
I'd say finish your stuff and find your people, and those are the first two. Those are the first two, and of course read a ton.
Mhm.
Read and read books that are in the genre that you want to be writing, not exclusively, but if you want to be writing, a contemporary middle grade fantasy, you better know what's being published in contemporary middle grade fantasy.
Mhm. Yeah.
um, Narnia and Wrinkle in Time were wonderful, groundbreaking books. They were also written, decades ago. So don't use that as your only example. Find out what's being published, now. And we do see this a lot when people are just starting out, especially if they haven't read kids' books in a while. A lot of times, a lot of us who love to write remember certain books when we were kids that were really important to us.
Yeah.
And I think that, I would argue that you know, maybe that's the time in our lives when books really can matter the most to us.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
And so, you know, I think it's, yeah, so it's thinking about a book can be that important to a kid, and think about the book that was that important to you, but now see what's being written now to see where you fit in with the market. Because you, if you know, I would never say to write to the market because the market's always changing. And you know, I don't believe in chasing a trend in publishing, but I do strongly believe in staying current, staying up to date on, you know, what, you know, there are certainly things that were, you know, considered fine to put in books 50 years ago that hopefully we would never see now. Because hopefully we have, you know, evolved,
Hmm.
you know, and become more inclusive and you know, just generally more thoughtful about such things. And that's important, you know, especially if you're going to be submitting stuff, you know where the state, know where publishing is.
Yeah. Because writing is like a business ultimately, you know.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. It is.
So this was really good, and I think that I can stop the recording now.